Everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Aaron Boyd. I'm the Senior Editor of Technology and Events at NextGov. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to today's webcast from NextGov and Route 50, Collaboration in Crisis, Strengthening Government Networks. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our underwriters, Worldwide Technology and VMware. This event could not take place today without their support. In this unprecedented moment, federal, state, and local government missions are more important than ever. As agencies across the country operate with remote and in-person hybrid workforces, leaders must have the right technical solutions in place to keep pace with telework increases. How are agencies utilizing future networks and new technologies in the face of teleworking mandates? And how are federal, state, and local IT communities collaborating across clouds, users, and devices? Today, we had planned to explore all these questions and more. Unfortunately, we have had a change to our agenda as our federal guest from the Veteran Affairs Office of Information Technology is dealing with an emergency situation and won't be able to join us today. Luckily, we still have a great guest joining us to talk about state and local issues, Alan Cunningham, Chief Information Officer of the state of Nevada. As a reminder to our audience, we hope you'll take advantage of the Q&A tab today to ask questions and interact with our panel. Be sure if you have questions as they come up, go ahead and put them in the chat. That way we can get right to it at the end of our program. Alan, thanks for joining us today. Please tell the people who you are, what you do, and what your job has to do with strengthening government networks.
Hi, good morning. My name is Alan Cunningham. I'm the Information Security Officer for the state of Nevada. Been in the position a whole 8 weeks so far. So still drinking from the fire hose and still learning. The position at the moment, I think, is really to be the cheerleader for enterprise IT services and for digital transformation. How can we use the digital tools available to allow our citizens to have a frictionless interface with government, or certainly a lower friction interface with government? That's the main thing that I want to do.
Excellent. Yeah, at the federal level, I cover mostly federal news. I dip my toe into the state and local with our Route 50 friends now and again. But that customer experience lens on technology is really a big push, right? Everybody's looking at, can we get government IT services at the same level as commercial? Is that something you all are struggling with in Nevada?
Well, it's an opportunity. I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's driven from our citizens. It's not driven from as much from enterprise IT services or IT services within agencies. Our citizens are saying, hey, if I can do this with Google and I can do it with Facebook and I can do it with Outlook, why can't I have the same kind of services from my state government and local government as well?
So often those conversations end up being about a new user interface or a new process, tree or something like that. But rarely, not too rarely, but you don't always get the conversation about the infrastructure side of things. What infrastructure is needed to provide good citizen services? How does that play with the work you do?
Well, it all comes down to one word: budget. And the reality of the situation is you cannot put those resources in place to support that type of expectation without proper budget, without proper funding. People look at their phones and they go, well, it's just there. They really don't realize the difference between, let's say, mobile networks and Wi-Fi. It just connects. But they don't realize behind that, there are multiple people who are working 24/7, 365 to keep those services available. And again, all that costs money. So what we're really trying to do is set expectations, not only for our citizens, but for our legislators and our governor, to say, if these are the services you want to provide, this is an absolute minimum that you need in place, not only to make those services work, but how do we excel at them? We can't excel at them on a baseline budget. You have to make the investment in the technology to get the win at the far end.
Looks like you got a doe back there stealing the show from us. Some nice nature scenery going on.
Yeah, well, I had 2 8-point bucks out there yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
We're in downtown Carson City, which is the state capital. And really, since COVID hit and people haven't been coming downtown, and the government buildings are mainly empty. I mean, most of the IT staff here, I think today in the office, we've probably got 3 people here. So the deer, which in my opinion are just long-legged rats.
I'm with you on that one.
And they're right outside the window. This is a kind of private little courtyard which is outside. I'm lucky enough to have outside my office, and not a lot of people walk by there. And the deer like to come in, and during the day they'll sit there and go to sleep because it's nice and quiet for them.
That's nice. Well, you pivot to a good topic though, with talking about the current teleworking for government services. How much you mentioned your office is only about 3 of you in the office on any given day, but more broadly, how much of the Nevada state government is working from home these days?
Well, quite a lot of it, mainly due to the fact that we already had the initiative in place for Office 365 for collaboration. If we had not have had that already in place, then we would have had major communication issues between all departments, and we would have had to move more and more people back into the office in a less safe manner, let's say. We've managed to keep social distancing. We've have people working from home. A lot of people use VPN, but that's becoming less and less because collaboration and files, we're not using shared drives very often. It's in OneDrive, it's up in SharePoint, wherever it happens to be. So it makes it much easier for for instance, a new employee, a new team member for the state doesn't need to have Teams. They can log into a web browser, go to portal.office.com, log in with their state credentials, and basically have everything they need to communicate effectively with the rest of the state.
And securely, one of the things we find at the federal level, we have a thing called the Trusted Internet Connection Policy, right? Where it's an older policy that they're currently in the midst of reworking, but the old policy said all traffic, no matter where it's coming from, has to be routed through a hub at a federal agency office, because you can't just connect to the Wi-Fi signal at Starbucks and get onto agency networks. How are you all managing that to let people work remotely and securely without just clogging up all your bandwidth?
Well, you have to balance confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are the three tenets of security. We moved way to the availability side, which means that confidentiality and integrity are going to be a little bit less. It's just the reality of the situation. If we want to continue to work in a safe manner from a COVID perspective, we have to give up a little bit on the information security perspective. Those connections are still coming through HTTPS. They still have passwords, hopefully strong and long passwords, and we educate our team members as far as we can. We're really heavy users of KnowBe4 because we realize that over 90% of breaches come from some type of email phishing campaign. So we heavily educate our team members to recognize those and hopefully not click on them.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to talk about within that is, how did you get executive buy-in? How do you get your higher ups to understand these things, these concepts? Because you mentioned that a lot of this work moving to remote collaboration tools happened pre-pandemic. How were those sold to people who might have been more security conscious or don't necessarily understand that trade-off and that risk management kind of framework?
Really, all you have to do is start talking dollars. It's like OPEX versus CAPEX. And, we're paying for this monthly. We don't have to have a huge infrastructure upfront investment to have these types of capabilities. And especially in Nevada, our enterprise IT services is totally funded on a chargeback model. So we don't have a technology fund that we can initiate those enterprise level proof of concepts. The only real reason that we moved on Office 365, one of their agencies had gone out and bought extra licenses, and they allowed us to use those licenses to bring on other agencies and then start the chargeback process from there. It would be much more efficient if we had a general fund, or not general fund, but an IT fund that we could fund those initiatives out of. Like, we're looking at chatbots at the moment. How do we implement chatbots? There's been some great success stories from Missouri, for instance. They've helped us out tremendously very, very giving of their time and their experience. They put their chatbots up over a weekend, and over the first 2 weeks, dropped their call volume to their unemployment center by 60%, which is massive.
Yeah.
So we're looking to get the same kind of gains from that, and it really helps because we've minimized the investment we had to make to get it up and running because of the help we got from other states.
What was the vehicle for getting that help? Or is it like a countrywide organization where CIOs get together and talk to each other, or through like NASIO, or how are you interacting, collaborating with your peers in other states?
Well, as a kind of new state CIO, just in 8 weeks, and NASIO has been invaluable. It's the ethos around NASIO. Like all the people, all the CIOs just want to help. I mean, I haven't had one CIO who said, "I'm too busy, I can't help you." Every single one that I've approached that said, "Okay, let's set up a meeting, let's talk about it." The Utah, Mike over there, he's phenomenal. I mean, they did a consolidation of IT services about 11, 12 years ago. And he had a fantastic idea. He had an external CPA come in and audit the books so that they could measure exactly how much money they were saving. He does that every year. Over the past 10 years, they've saved over $72 million by that IT type consolidation. And it's not consolidation from a power perspective. There are a lot more enterprise-wide services that need to support specific agencies. And agencies do have their own particular software, like DPS has CGIS and some really, how can I say this, higher level security softwares that only certain people are allowed to get into. You have to be fully fingerprinted, you have to be vetted, those types of things. So they would really sit on top of the enterprise IT stack, and they would still administer all those specific softwares. There are things that enterprise IT services are not good at, but there are other things that we are good at, and we should be, from firewall to desktop. For instance, security. There should be base security levels across every agency. Unfortunately, in Nevada revised statutes, the NRS, there are 11 agencies who are not considered under enterprise IT services. So they have the ability, they have their own IT shops, they have their own security shop, they can do the same things. What I see is that is a little bit of a crack that might be exploited in the future.
Especially, presumably those what you call them, like independent agencies or separate agencies from your enterprise IT. Presumably those systems connect back to the enterprise IT?
Yeah. And that therein lies the issue for me from a security background. I'm a certified CISSP. So, and I spent 4 years as an ISO. So security is really high on my list. It really got my sizzle when I got appointed. He's like, "Yeah, somebody who really understands what I mean." When I start talking certificates and encryption and those types of things. So it's really interesting to see how to balance those three: confidentiality, integrity, availability.
Yeah.
Most people, especially during the pandemic, fell right over the availability. We need people to be able to get in from home. I don't care what the security is. How can we get that done? And accept the risk. And then we have to build around the risk moving forward by increasing our scanning, increasing how we watch traffic to see if there's any anomalies that we can latch onto, because we know we can't just say, "No, you're not going to connect." It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Business eats security for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right?
Yes. Culture eats change for breakfast is the one I always remember. I guess a Ziegler quote, if I remember right.
So we got less than 15 minutes left, and I want to kind of split the rest of our conversation into two buckets. And also just a reminder to folks in the audience, if you have questions, go ahead and send those in. If I'm not seeing a bunch of questions within the next 10 minutes, I'm going to blow right past the Q&A. So if you do have questions, send those in sooner than later. But the rest of our conversation, I want to break into two buckets. What you're doing to help pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and what you're thinking post-pandemic about your state agency, the actual government function infrastructure, and then pivot to the rest of the state, what you're doing for the citizens and then the people living in Nevada. So first off, what was the state of your infrastructure for the Nevada government pre-pandemic? You mentioned that you're already moving toward collaboration tools, but can you walk us toward where you were at before February and March and how things have changed since then?
I can intimate a little bit about that. Unfortunately, I didn't start until August 31st.
Right.
It was my first day in the position. So I've tried to pick up what was happening back then from people who've been here a little bit longer than I have. And yes, the big thing that helped us was the fact we had collaboration tools in the pipeline because people were forward looking enough to see that. There was a little bit of disjointedness between different levels of agency because funding isn't, as I say, we have a chargeback model. There are some agencies like DMV and DETR and DHSS that have federal funding or they have their own technology funds. Our DMV actually has a technology fee that's charged to every registration on vehicles. So they have a lot of technology that's not there for the rest of the state agencies.
Right.
So there's not a lot of normalization would be a good word to use.
Yeah.
The citizens, as I say, are starting to ask for those services that they get normally through private sector. Why can't my government give me that same level of service? You know, if it's 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning and I want to file a new business form, why can't I do that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we're looking at pivoting and changing from a probably more of a reactive organization to a proactive organization as a government perspective, certainly from IT, so that we look ahead and we anticipate the needs of our citizens.
So how are you doing that? Are you developing like purchasing guides for different offices within the government so that they know, hey, if I all of a sudden need to go from wet signatures to e-signatures, these are the pre-approved list of vendors, or do you have an open door policy or something that lets them come to you? How are you managing the needs of individual programs and offices?
See, we're really trying, I'm trying to build those communication bridges to the agencies because we have a couple of committees, but the committees only meet on a quarter, 3 monthly basis,
Yeah.
bi-yearly. So really the cadence of technology is faster than that. And also one thing that really affects us is the cadence of the biannual legislative process,
Mm.
which to me is, I would say that'd be the glacial part. And then technology is how, the dinosaurs were running. And the glacial part is just holds us back all the time. And I think we trying either some type of gearing or some way to disengage technology funding and the way that technology is motivated within the state from the legislative process to allow us to take advantage of new technology as soon as it becomes available, or
Mm-hmm.
at least make plans for it beforehand. Right now, we have to guess like a year in advance before we can put in bills to the legislature, of the legislative process approve them, and then it's almost a year and a half before we can try to implement.
Right, because you were saying, because I'm just not familiar with Nevada's processes in specific. You said it was a biennial budget process, so every 2 years.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So really, you've gone through 2 cycles of Moore's law
Yeah.
before you get to approve it. So it could be out of date.
And that's just how fast the technology improves, right? Right now, we're in, as I mentioned in the opening, and every commercial on TV mentions right now, we are in unprecedented times, right? So the needs of the citizens are also evolving so rapidly. What kind of pipeline have you developed with the citizenry to get those needs back? Are you hearing directly from people, or do you have to hear it through offices and programs?
I like to look at the local news, and I'm pretty gregarious, so I speak to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Local business owners. I know a lot of local business owners try and get their feeling for not only how they've been affected by COVID, but what as a government entity can we do to help them to simplify processes. Business license renewals, which is mainly a city thing, but local government as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
state government, but state government for taxes and payroll taxes. And and this came from a small business owner I know really well who I've worked with in the past. He's like, well, your Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation are having all these problems with PUA claims, UI claims, and fraud. Why are they not tapped into the state payroll tax database so that you can actually cross match, so that when you get a claim in, if you cross match it to the payroll taxes,
Mm-hmm.
they're still employed and getting paid taxes on, then they don't apply. Sorry, they don't qualify for PUA or unemployment insurance.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, I don't know if that's happening. And I brought that suggestion up to our strike force task force, and they went looking at that to see if they can get that put in. But bringing those ideas from our constituents forward, I think, is really important. I'd like to have some town hall meetings. I'd like to have some input, and I'm about to launch a new CIO portal for the state of Nevada, and we have a citizens request area there. So citizens will be able to go in and go, well, why is this happening? And hopefully build up that dialogue that we can explain why things are the way they are, as opposed to, well, you're just not doing it.
Right. And so let's say somebody goes into this portal and they say, I interacted with such and such an office, and I really wish that it was digitized in this specific way. Would you then in your office write up, say, a proposal and bring it to that program and say, look, we can institute this technological solution. It will cost you this much in chargebacks and give you this kind of ROI. Is that kind of the process?
Yeah, we would work with that agency.
Right, because you can't just do it unilaterally.
There's no authority for us to do that at the moment. So what I do is, first of all, you got to take the idea and see, is it more than just one person?
Mm.
Because there has to be a groundswell of support. You can't make a change just for 0.001% of citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it and say, hey, this is a really good idea, this could help multiple agencies, it could help multiple citizens within the state, then write up a white paper, come up with some, and really we don't have ROI in the state for return on investment. It's more about return on mission.
Good way to look at it. Yeah.
How do we improve our service level to our citizens? And that's really how I look at it. It's not really, can I save a buck? Can I save a nickel? Is it going to cost me more? It's how does it improve the citizen experience?
Mm-hmm.
Does it improve education for our K-12 or our higher education students? How does it affect our veterans? How does it affect our elderly population? And surprisingly enough, when you start looking at who is implementing cloud solutions or who are really taking part in cloud solutions, our older citizens make up a large percentage of people who are adopting these. For communication is the big thing with them. They can do this type of meeting really easily and still stay in contact, even with people who, I do it frequently with my parents, across in Scotland.
Mm.
And actually, I just had a good friend of mine who had to fly back to Scotland. His dad is not well at the moment. But he had his father's whole flat, his whole apartment set up with cameras because his father suffered a little bit from dementia. So he'd wander away and it would alert him on the camera back here in Reno. And he could actually contact the social worker or contact the authorities back in Scotland to get the issue taken care of. So using technology as a tool to solve a problem.
Yeah. I've had like 6 different questions I want to dig into, but we're running short on time. So last question for you, and I want to pivot to that other side of things, which is the broader infrastructure for the state. And you mentioned like those cameras, right? And that kind of thing. In order to really pull that off, you do need a certain level of infrastructure and bandwidth and the like. And that, of course, is going to explode someday with the introduction of 5G and these other things. How is Nevada looking forward at those kind of infrastructure improvements? Do you have any 5G pilots running? And how are you looking statewide at the needs of both cities and rural communities to have a strong connection to the internet?
Yeah, we actually have a broadband initiative office, which is under the Office of Science and Technology. And it's mainly to extend broadband to our rural communities. We have major fiber routes that run east-west and north-south.
Mm-hmm.
We have switch with major data centers north-south. We work a lot with NDOT, Nevada Division of Transportation. So anytime that they're making road improvements, we can liaise with them and ask them, hey, can you lay fiber there? We have a pretty extensive microwave network throughout the whole state. That's an impressive map to look at.
Yeah.
And we have snowcats, we have snowmobiles. Our microwave technicians have to go through winter survival training about every season, because these are wild places up on 12, 14,000 foot mountains in the middle of nowhere to provide microwave transmission. And those are mainly for our public safety, our peace officers, etc. But that has a 350 megabyte throughput. So for really rural areas, we can do downlinks from the microwave to whatever local fiber is. And our bottleneck is going to be the 350 meg, but you would never get fiber laid all the way out to middle of nowhere, Nevada,
Right.
because there's a lot of empty space around here.
Well, and so yeah, I just want to harp on that for a little bit, especially during the pandemic, right? As everybody's working from home, how much of your workforce and just the general Nevadan workforce was commuting in from those remote areas and now has to figure out a way to have enough broadband or whatever to get their jobs done? Is that an issue right now for Nevadans?
I wouldn't say the bandwidth itself is an issue. A lot of places it's like, okay, can we get power? And is there any connectivity whatsoever?
Okay.
You go out past Elko, you go to Battle Mountain, and then come south a little bit through the Ruby Mountains. There's nothing. Hey, take a look at an AT&T coverage map. Take a look at a Sprint coverage map. Take a look at any of the cell phone providers. There are big holes in Nevada.
Sorry to interrupt you just because we're running short on time, and I think I've crystallized what I really want to hear from you. What's your wish list on that? If you were able to get that connectivity to those people, would it come from having the carriers step up, having the state of Nevada step up, the federal government, or a mix of all of the above?
I think it has to be a mix of all the above, because especially with 5G, I don't know of any government entity who have a 5G initiative. The 5G initiative is coming from the private sector, from the current carriers. It would be great to have more federal funds to jumpstart and continue. It's all well and good getting a grant, but it's how do you make it continuous? Where does the money come from to keep that service going in 4, 5, 10 years time? A lot of times it's grant money, it's something, and then it's like, okay, where do we get the licensing for this next year? And you're scrimping around trying to find the money. Survivability is something we really look at here,
especially in those crazy weather conditions, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember it's got to be 15 years ago now when Reno only had one fiber connection. It ran north-south between Reno and Nevada and Vegas. And they were building new houses to the south of town, and somebody took a backhoe through the fiber connection.
Oh.
And for 3 days, Reno had no connectivity. I mean, even the cell carriers didn't have connectivity. So that's why they put an east-west connection in along I-80 that runs from Salt Lake City to San Francisco, as well as we have the fiber that runs north-south. And when they put that fiber in, it really opened up the economic development, because Apple now have a huge data center that sits right on that fiber, which is about 10 miles east of Reno.
So you were talking before about return on mission, but if you do it right, return on mission also gets you return on investment, right?
Yeah, you've got to look at the infrastructure, and a lot of that was driven by private sector, but it really the state government stepped up and helped a lot with tax breaks. And you probably heard, but look up the Reno Tahoe industrial area, which is just to the east of Reno, about 15, 20 miles.
Mm-hmm.
You have Apple, Switch, Panasonic, Tesla. Walmart has its largest West Coast distribution center. Their warehouse fills up a whole valley. It's unbelievable the scale that is out there. And until you go to it, Switch's data center is called the Citadel. It looks like this massive, escape from New York kind of building that's built into the side of the hill. That's earthquake proof and bomb proof. And
Wow.
you go for a visit there, and you go up to the desk, and right through the plexiglass are 4 MP5s, body armor, helmets on the wall. That's their QRF, and every security guy who works there is ex-military.
Whew. So they let you know right off the top they mean business.
Yeah, they take their security seriously.
Well, that's good to hear, right? It needs to happen that way. Yeah, Alan. Unfortunately, though, we are out of time. So really, thank you for joining us today and sharing some of your insights from the last 2 months on the job.
Pleasure. Thank you very much for the invite.
So for now, though, we're not done with our program. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague James Hansen for a session with our underwriter.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron and Alan, for sharing those insights. A lot of great stuff there to dissect. As Aaron, you mentioned it a couple times. We're in unprecedented times. Those times aren't going to change overnight. But I think as witnessed between your and Alan's conversation, agencies have done a tremendous amount to enable secure collaboration for services, for citizens, for internal stakeholders. And so I'm excited to really continue that conversation with Susan McHugh-Pauley from Worldwide Technology. Welcome, Susan.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here. I appreciate it.
No, I'm excited to chat with you. Can you tell our audience just a little bit about yourself and your role at WWT?
Sure. I've had the pleasure of coming to WWT about just a little over 2 years ago. I'm the strategic advisor for public sector civilian. It definitely has been a eye-opening experience. Worldwide has just really enlightened me to everything globally that they do. And, what I think one of the main reasons I came here was because of the culture and how they show up differently. I started my career in federal government about 30 years ago at DOJ, and then at the old INS, and then we moved on after 9/11 unfortunately happened in this country, and ended up helping stand up DHS and worked with immigration and customs enforcement. And after standing up, running all their field ops and going out and seeing all the different things I could do with helping the services that they had, we went and set up an enterprise command center, and then I had the opportunity to put in for a position at Veterans Affairs and was selected. So I retired after 31 years out of Veterans Affairs as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for IT Operations and Services.
Well, thank you for your service throughout there. We heard Aaron and Alan talk pretty extensively around infrastructure and strengthening networks. How has Worldwide enabled collaboration and strengthened networks during this time of multiple crises, not just the pandemic, but wildfires and other natural disasters? What is some of the work that you guys are doing with your partners and customers?
There's a lot of work that we're doing, and Worldwide, it's ingrained to our culture is collaboration. We do that every day. We do it with large OEMs, small businesses. I mean, that's just built into who we are as a company. The company is 30 years. We just celebrated our 30-year anniversary, and still privately owned. And it's really, it's been something that, because of all of that we do on not just the commercial side and the federal side with DoD, civilian, and science and technology, it's just really been something that we move forward. Some of the unique things that we did during this time is really work with our OEM partners to ensure that there was little disruption. And we know for the challenges within COVID and what happened is how could we embrace and really help all the agencies get speed to mission, right? Much like Alan had said, right, there isn't a really return on your ROI, but how are you looking to really help get those services out as quickly as possible? And one of the things that Worldwide does really well is accelerate execution. and how to really, all hands on deck. It's just part of the culture. And that's one thing that, really rises above. I think some of the things that we did differently is that within going out is some of our OEM partners came to us, the majority of them, but also our customers asking us for help. And we, in turn, reached out to our OEM partners and say, what can we do to help on both sides of the house? And, VMware, for example, said, look, do not worry about any problems or issues with us getting our product. We're there for you. And they did not fail. Many other vendors did that as well. So, it's really, I would say, the collaboration that was just, I think, throughout the country and throughout the world because of the crisis, what happened. I know specifically on some of the things that, we had to become very creative on. And, looking at how, to veterans on what we could do to help them. We had to, because of the health crisis, what could we do to, assist the medical centers and the immediate need that was at hand? So we worked with some of our OEMs. We collaborated, for example, one of the things that was really on the ground was with the Howard carts that they had at the medical centers for medical dispensing of all types of pharmaceuticals. We assisted them into making them telemedicine carts and how we could really work with them to go there. We also worked with like the police that were in, VA at the medical centers have their own policing staff. So what we did there was we took all their cameras and worked with them to retrofit them to how we could do them for patient monitoring, especially out in some of the field areas that they had to stand up automatically, right, for COVID and that. So, and then, we were lucky with having, again, the great relationship that we have with VMware, that they had the ability to really rapidly and virtually go ahead and, push out the virtual desktops, the applications, and to make sure that all of the workers that were now having to work remotely in different various areas and really in a different environment, we were able to, provide that capability for them first time. I know also on the technology that we have and with our CTAs and a lot of the creative folks that we have, we showed up, I can say, with really focusing in on the thermal temperatures and what we could do remotely with that. So Worldwide came up with the elevated temperature. It's the temperature detection solution, and I'll make sure the link's provided. But basically, it's a whole camera system that allows when someone is coming into a facility, whether it be a medical center or coming into, any type of facility, not just at VA, but, for any type of our customers, they're able to really get the true pulse of what the temperature was safely and distancing from the individual so that both the employee is safe, the person that's coming in is safe, and making sure that the data is really accurate and also in real time, right? Because a lot of these things, you have to go not just a temperature, but using the data of what we can do to make sure that that's really, again, speed to services, right? There's a lot of people under a lot of stress during these things, and how do we make sure that we're putting them at ease and working with our partners to do that? So that's really good. We also, again, because of the clever and talented people that we have at Worldwide, the Meraki camera systems that we have that were being used, from Cisco, taking them and how do we repurpose them? So at the medical centers, for example, taking that for healthcare. And so you're really monitoring the patients with those camera systems, saving your PPE, right? PPE was really hard to get. And to make sure that this, again, your safety of your on the ground frontline workers were there. So if you didn't have to go into a room so many times, that would really protect their health and really, give them additional services quickly. They were getting a prompt response to the patient or whatever they could do, but also save on how many times they had to change out their gloves or their masks or things of that nature. And then carrying those systems and working with other agencies, even in in the sheriff's department or, law enforcement, just to cut down how many times that you had to really change that in the difficult times that, the country had in getting that personal protective equipment. So there are a lot of things that, coming up, and right, innovation isn't just technology, it's that business process and working around that, right? How do we get to that to make sure that we're, working with our customers so that we're meeting those needs, making sure that we're meeting them safely, but also continuing to lean forward and to see what might be coming down the road. I know that, you can't really predict exactly, but we know that there are going to be other needs that are coming on. And, it's that, from the state and locals as well, how servicing them that we've done. They've got, we've serviced a lot of financial institution, pharmaceutical institution, hospitals, banking. There's so many areas that we've been able to serve on our civilian side. And, to the state and locals point, those rural areas, that's one of the challenges that we know, especially in the healthcare side. How we're going to be able to work on get those communications out there. You have so many, excuse me, for the first time in this country, right? We had, Doctors Without Borders having to go to the Navajo reservation just because, the technology wasn't there, sending some mobile hospitals so that we could help those folks that, the communication wasn't there, but making sure that we could be there to help them out and to get that done. So working again with not just reservation, state, local, county folks to make sure that we could get those things done. I think there was a lot of opportunity, a lot of different things that were done, and it was really from what WWT is all about, from an idea to an outcome. How do we get those outcomes to get those services there, or whatever we need to get accomplished?
No, that is, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and there are a lot of use cases. I mean, it's interesting that, Alan was talking about he's only been on the job in his current role for, a shorter period of time, but how he was able to reach out to the CIO of Missouri and look at use cases from the state of Utah. I mean, tell me how that collaboration process worked. You said that like you worked with a lot of your OEMs together to, identify opportunities to support agencies during kind of this time for crisis. How do you in your, how you're working with OEMs, but then how do you share those outcomes? And how do you take one use case that is for protecting doctors on the front line to protecting law enforcement on the front line? Can you expand a little bit in a little more detail about how that collaboration and information sharing in terms of looking at one architecture and applying it to another, or one use case and applying it to another?
Well, I think it's because, in public sector, we focus in on, what our customer needs are and anticipating them, right? And during this time when COVID just came out, it's how do we take the technology that's there, look at working on our ideation sessions and talking with our OEMs as well as our customers on when they come to us and say, we need X. Is that really what they need, or how do we get to yes on that? Is it changing a business process? Is it taking one solution and lifting and shifting to get that out? It may not be something that you have to start at ground zero. For example, like the Meraki cameras, right? How can we repurpose them in different business lines? And so working with the OEMs on that, and meeting with them regularly, but really it's that good business communication, right? And really understanding where the priorities are. So for example, for VA, like in New York, when they had to stand up the first hospitals with COVID, with the 50 beds, we worked with FEMA, right? Now FEMA, is underneath DHS, but, how do that necessary interrelationship that you have with, VA being, again, VA is the first medical responder, right, for the entire nation if there is an issue there. So, you have FEMA that comes in underneath DHS, linking that over within VA, and then how do you, work on that? We also had, various things. You had the OIT leadership within VA, collaborate with like Dr. Galpin and the staff at the Office of Connected Care to ensure that the video connect and things, how to, all of a sudden WebEx and TeleX and everything came up, right? Not just with your remote workers, but, with your health and that. But I think it's really about communication and collaboration and, making sure those, needs are met, but also understanding the priorities of what needs to get done and that sense of urgency to get it done.
So pivoting a little bit, and I love I'm assuming with those ideation sessions, you actually bring the customer in with you and kind of you have that, one-to-one collaboration and then kind of map all of that out. I love the concept of that. Gears a little bit, and you mentioned telemedicine. How do we protect data and PII in terms of telemedicine? We heard that great example from Alan, and that his friend had family over in Scotland. Right. Went up, set up those cameras, and then so he could monitor them from home. Tell us a little bit about the approach in terms of how do we maintain security in this environment.
Well, I think it's security is everyone's responsibility, right? But also, I think it's really how do we make sure that the security that are needed in these times, that people are getting educated and keeping it simplified for that end user. But you have to look at protecting data, right? That's the number one thing for everyone, right? But I would say that there's several ways, right, to safeguard it. You have system monitoring, you've got multi authentication, you've got data encryption. I mean, there's various ways, but coming out with the virtual world when it's almost like the art of the possibility. People didn't think things could get done as quickly as they could. I think it was the scalability that was the biggest challenge, and people were you don't know what you don't know, and being unaware and really concerned about how is that going to be secure, that information in your home. You have everything from PII data and your HIPAA data, and making sure that's done. I would say that in the technology side, that there's so much security that can be done. VMware does a great job with their applications and all their virtual desktops and what's there. You also have all the other OEMs that have that, but really keeping it simplified so that the end user has a clear understanding, and that when it comes back, being able to know how to raise any concerns and issues from there. The data itself, you have data, all types of data, right? Data at rest, data protection, but making sure, the individual, people have a simplicity and ease of access, because once the end user knows that information is secure and they've received easy experience of getting that at home, knowing that it's not difficult to set up, I think that's really the educational point that we all need to be mindful of, and working with our OEMs to ensure that the latest and greatest technology is able to be applied quickly and seamlessly, and VMware does do that.
Yeah, Alan I talked about that frictionless access, and he talked about kind of his 3 pillars of confidentiality, accessibility, and integrity, kind of around securing data and providing services. What would you say is it infrastructure, or what is the key to ensuring that these citizen services, whether it be state and local and applying for small business loans, or unemployment at a larger federal level, what would you say the key is to ensuring that you have those security protocols in place, but also services aren't being disrupted? One thing, is it infrastructure? Is it a multi-cloud approach? Is there anything that comes to mind there?
Well, I would think that it's all of that above, right? It depends on where you're at and the level of access that you have, and the level of what is required, right? Some people have too much, but really streamlining it. I think during this COVID time at many government agencies, it also gave them a chance to clean up a lot of the accessibility that they had, ensuring that the multi-factor authentication was right, that the people had the right level to the right access of what they needed. I think it gave agencies a time to really look at all their monitoring tools and what they were going to be doing, and then taking that data back that they could see and really make it usable data, so that they could, eliminate if they had people that had access to things that they didn't need and didn't require. Their role had changed and hadn't done that. So I think that it's a collaboration of both, but really making sure that you're looking at various levels, right? Because security comes to really risk management, right? How are you going to make sure that you're willing to take this level of risk, and making sure that you can manage the risk, monitor the risk, have access to that, and go forward from there.
So Aaron and Alan kind of at the end were concluding and talking about 5G. Is in terms of looking at further technologies, whether it be data analytics and AI, whether it be 5G, what do federal agencies, state and local agencies need to do in terms of their infrastructure and their networks to prepare for emerging technologies?
Well, I think across the board, all agencies, state, local, federal, everyone is looking at 5G, the capabilities, and where can they go. I think also, too, one of the main focuses of the federal government and what many areas that we're looking to assist them with as well is getting to the basic block and tackling in your geographic areas. How do you get those rural folks that communication that's needed? 5G is nice, but if you have no G, then that's a problem, right? I mean, so how do we start there and make that accessibility? VA started with the first 5G hospital that they're looking at, right? Everyone has these great starting pilots, but we have many areas in this country that don't even have the basic block and tackling, right? So I think that there's parallel paths going on. I know that several agencies, FCC and that, are looking in and, to how do they get that out there remotely. I know that we're looking to help and come up with other ideas of how, what are ways that we can lean forward on the technology side to really assist in getting those rural things, as well as taking the areas that have a real strong already innovation tie, like the new medical center that came up with 5G, the one medical center at VA, right? And also taking areas that are looking at really focusing in on that. How can we take that technology and put it so, you look at the ports of entry, for example, at CBP and what's going on underneath DHS. How can we use that to strengthen that there? What can we use in different areas of the country to really expedite that? And is it right to start, where do you start on some of these, initiatives that you get, quote, not so much the best bang for the buck, but is it the right area to start at when, you need to really streamline in, and then looking at taking the infrastructure, right? If you only have a 2G, laptop or workstation, if that's as fast it's going to go, it doesn't matter if you get a 5G, 17G, whatever, it doesn't really matter, right? If you have to look at that, infrastructure that all the agencies have, the capability of what's in there, in your technical debt, what you have in your asset management and your supply chain. And that's really, one of the things that's major is like, looking at, from an agency perspective, what's it going to cost to get to that new level of 5G, and what's the right path and strategy to get there, right? Because, strategy is great to come up with, this is how we're going to get there, but the culture is how we do it, right? How are you going to get that? If you only have so much funding and so many things that are going on, that'll definitely be a driver for that.
And so I think those are all great examples. Where's a place, like if an agency wanted to work with Worldwide and VMware or any of its, other OEM partners, where would they go to come and say, how would you help them in the process? You mentioned the ideation centers, but saying because every agency is different. Every agency has different mission requirements, whether it be at the state and local level or at the federal level, with CBP at the ports versus VA in a remote rural area that has a VA hospital. How do you look at their specific capabilities or their specific infrastructure and start them at one place to get them to where they need to be?
Well, at Worldwide, we have, of course, public sector that is made up of our three entities, Department of Defense, civilian, as well as our SLED team for the state and local. We have one of the first places that is available for everyone to see what Worldwide is about is our digital platform. And I'll make sure the link is posted in here for everyone to see. And I would highly encourage everyone to go out and definitely take a look out there. We have 3 areas underneath our digital platform. We've got over 40,000 end users out there now, but we have our Advanced Technology Center, which is really a virtual environment for the OEMs and technical and knowledge folks to really go out and take a look of what's there. It's a $500 million investment. and it's got over 100 OEMs sitting out there. There's over 600 pre-built capabilities that are available. And right now there's over 5,000 customer engagements out there. There are a lot of things that are out there for people to go and access. There are labs. There are things that are already done, and that people, instead of starting at ground zero, can go out and see and pull the information that is available on efforts that may be underway. Anyone can create an account on our WWT platform. It's very easy, and I highly recommend that anybody go out and do that. We also have our integrated technology centers. There are 4 of them around globally. They're really our global supply chain. They are really our integration center. I want to say that between the ATC, ITC, and our application services, they are the heartbeat of Worldwide. The ITC alone, just amazing. Before I even came to Worldwide, Worldwide is headquartered in St. Louis. I flew to St. Louis and actually went to the ITC. It's amazing. With the 4 ITCs, we've got three continents. We've got Amsterdam, Singapore, and Mumbai, and then we have, of course, the main one in St. Louis. But it's over 4 million square feet of just space and integration that's going on. We have our own carpenters. What that group does is just, all of them are just rock star. The ATC is just, a crown jewel. And, just seeing the capabilities that they have and what they do globally, and to make sure the time of just the time to service and to help our agencies get speed to mission is incredible. The turnaround is, and what they can do, plus with the customer interaction engagement right there on site, whether it be virtually, coming and seeing what's there. So to have our customers come in and really take a look at our platform, reach out to us in any way that, we have our platform that you can contact us on, certainly myself or any of the folks that are available. But there are all kinds of ways and services that we provide. When you see, again, we are one of the things when I took this job, my husband said, well, why did you take that job? You were looking at them. What interests you about them? I said, they're like a little golden nugget. I said, I worked 30 plus years in the federal government, and I didn't know about this company. And I was very excited because I was brought on to help stand up their DC Innovation Center. To how do we bring, St. Louis into DC, into our beautiful new, 2-year-old office now. But if I would have known some of those capabilities when I was deputy CIO or ICE and standing up all these other areas that I worked in, it would have helped me tremendously. Not just me, but the entire agency, to really go, and us as taxpayers, right? Because when we look at things, it's like, do we, what is not just a return on investment, right? But return on how we can do, get the services timely. What are we doing? Is it, ways that we can make sure that it's an ease of service, but providing that to people and really giving everyone an opportunity to see, if we're going to lose or have an issue, let's fail fast, right? But if others have, lessons learned, how do we share those across the board? And that's a uniqueness from this company, that we really collaborate. We're all about teamwork and having, good, just really a strong culture of, really being successful and helping each other out. And we want to make our customers, successful. We want to share information, and we want to make sure that, whatever that customer outcome is, we want to make sure that we're meeting that and working with them to get there successfully.
No, I think that's fantastic. I think that, the ability to replicate an environment and to share lessons learned and actual technology stacks and requirements between agencies. We know one of the biggest challenges with government is they, operating in a silo. So, if Worldwide can provide that bridge, Alan talked about it. He wouldn't have known about Missouri if it wasn't for NASCIO. And it's those, groups and organizations and companies that, make it possible for us to operate and collaborate in a time of crisis, which is really, what we're here to discuss. So,
right. And just as labs as a service that are available, right? If I don't have to go in the federal process and spend all the time through the procurement so that something shows up and then I own a box, right? We can stand up labs that are as a service that are ATC really quickly within 30, 60 days. And, bring that up instead of having to go through all that procurement process and do those things. So again, it's about speed, services, and getting to the outcome timely.
That's awesome. Well, unfortunately, that is the end of our time, because I think that there's so much more to share and collaborate about with our audience, especially in these challenging times. But we are making it work for our citizens and sharing information. So I want to thank Worldwide and VMware for underwriting today's event. And for both Alan and Susan for taking the time to speak with us. As a reminder, this event has been recorded, so you will be receiving a copy of that and other helpful links and documents via email post-event. So we really encourage you to pass those along to your colleagues and partners. And as always, thank you for tuning in, and hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you again, Susan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. Stay healthy.
You too.